is why I want to shift over now to Dallas's perspective. We talked about the Knicks, talked about Jalen Brunson, but I do think that an important question to ask is what this would mean for the Dallas Mavericks if they would lose him, and also who would be the best fits to replace him if he were to leave. And I think from Dallas's perspective, they're in a very peculiar and precarious situation because Dallas is in a bind here. This is a team that just reached the Western Conference Finals, and they're on the verge of losing their second best player that helped lead them to a place they haven't been in over a decade, since Dirk Nowitzki's Dallas Mavericks won the NBA Finals in 2011. That was the last time that the Mavericks had even reached the Western Conference Finals, 11 years ago. And yes, Tim Hardaway Jr. is coming back. He did not play at all last postseason, rather. Yes, I like the trade for Christian Wood, a versatile big who can stretch the floor and shoot. Yes, you still have Spencer Dinwiddie coming off the bench, but what you need and what Jalen Brunson provided was an additional secondary playmaker, sturdy ball handler, a playmaker that can create not only for himself but for others to relieve Luka at times. The Mavericks had their most success not only when Luka was playing well, but especially when the ball was moving, when there had some energy to it. Other guys were getting shots. Other guys were creating for one another. Drive and kick, open three. That's what made the Mavericks beat the Phoenix Suns. It's what allowed them to reach the Western Conference Finals. It wasn't simply Luka now, Luka forever. They needed some more playmaking. And I think that a lot of people are going to draw the comparison between the Mavericks last season and the Atlanta Hawks from 2 years ago, reaching the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think that it's different, but there are some similarities. And even though most people expected not the Hawks necessarily to return to the Eastern Conference Finals, they thought they'd be a little bit better to start the season. But the similarity is that their recipe for success, the run that they had, wasn't sustainable. It wasn't built to be repeated. And I think that's the thing with Dallas is, yes, they just made the Western Conference Finals, but I don't think that run is necessarily repeatable. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think you say, well, because we have Luka and because if we can re-sign Jalen Brunson or not, that we're automatically shoo-ins to reach the Western Conference Finals. That's not how this team operates. A lot in the eyes of many, the Mavericks kind of reached the Western Conference Finals perhaps slightly because of a fluke and more because of how we lamented the way the Phoenix Suns crumbled down the stretch of that series. And there are a lot of good teams returning in the Western Conference this season. The Clippers are coming back. Obviously, the Warriors, the Nuggets are going to be healthier. Obviously, yes, Mavericks will still be in it. The Grizzlies, another year under their belt. The Timberwolves, the Pelicans are a better team. Who knows what the Lakers are going to do? There are a lot of good teams vying for the top spot, and they're not that far apart. So for the Dallas Mavericks, for me, this is a really interesting offseason for them. I know they've been rumored to target Luka's Slovenian teammate, Goran Dragic. Provides ball handling duties. Is he an upgrade over Jalen Brunson? No. But their biggest Achilles heel last season wasn't their defense, wasn't their lack of shooting. It was their lack of playmaking, their lack of creators. So for the Mavericks, the interesting thing is with the free agents out there, the only guys who I thought could be interesting ideas and serviceable parts to replace Brunson, one, are the two big, or the main people are the two biggest distressed assets in the NBA, Kyrie Irving and James Harden. Those two guys, funny enough, ironically enough, are the two most intriguing pieces that I think could replace Jalen Brunson. Kyrie Irving with his shooting, with his ball handling, the fact that he prefers to play off the ball as a point guard masquerading as a shooting guard, essentially masquerading as a shooting guard. Harden, I think, could play a little bit off the ball with Luka, but those two guys obviously are wild cards and they come with their own baggage. So if you're not going to pursue those two guys, which they likely won't, Perhaps you look at a sign and trade with the Charlotte Hornets for Miles Bridges. Miles Bridges straight up for Jalen Brunson. Well, why would the Hornets and Miles Bridges want to do this? Well, Miles Bridges, he gets his money, which is what he's coveting. He's coveting that max contract that the Hornets don't appear willing to pay him. So he gets his money. The Hornets receive a guard in Jalen Brunson, who's an upgrade over Terry Rozier, who's a sturdier ball handler. He can help relieve LaMelo Ball. I think he could play in the backcourt well with LaMelo Ball. You move off of Terry Rozier. And the Mavericks, again, they get a big wing who can shoot, who's athletic, who's dynamic. He's got his money. He'd be motivated. You retain the size and the athleticism. And now you got a really big Mavericks team. That's one option. You could potentially look at, obviously Bradley Beal is the most ideal piece, but he could fit almost anywhere. That's just the way that he plays, his style, his shooting. He would be a huge asset for any team to collect Bradley Beal's services. Perhaps you do a trade with the Memphis Grizzlies. I've thought about this. Perhaps a Tyus Jones and Desmond Bane type of trade for Jalen Brunson, because Memphis, again, you get an upgrade over Tyus Jones, another backcourt player with John Morant who can shoot it, who can create for himself and for others. The Mavericks get a sturdy point guard in Tyus Jones who can create, obviously not as well. And you get Desmond Bane, who's a physical shooter. He can hit the three ball. He can defend. He's ascending as a young player in the NBA. Perhaps that's a trade that you look at and you entertain. But again, Dallas is in a pickle here because there aren't many great free agents out there. They did just reach the Western Conference Finals. They're trying to build off of that momentum that they had from last season, and yet they're on the verge of losing their second best guy. So I do think they need another elite playmaker. I'm not sure who it's going to be. I listed out some of the better fits, but it's an interesting situation and dilemma that the Mavericks are in, because Jalen Brunson's absence really does leave it could leave, assuming he leaves, a big void and vacancy in that roster that they would need to patch up very quickly.